and start. So welcome everybody to today's session organized by Vodafone Africa. This is the 8th installment of the Metadata for Machines workshop. So I think we are nearing the end, more or less. My name is Charles Kahiro. I am the Creative Director at RaboWorks Africa, a leading provider for consulting services in organizational management, learning, and L&D. And today we have a very special session. So we have Eric leading the session as always, but he is joined by John Graybill from CEDA, which is the Center for Expanded Data Annotation and Retrieval. And he'll be taking us through his metadata creation solution that has been highlighted, I think, over the past two workshops, the one for last week and the one before that. So before we get into it, as always, just keep your mics muted to prevent background noises from disrupting the presentation. So if you haven't done so yet, please take time to do so now. And as always, if you have any questions during the presentation, just drop them in the chat box and we will bring them up during the presentation so that they can be addressed. As well, we will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation in case there are any additional comments, clarifications, or questions that need to be dealt with. With that, I hand over to you, Eric.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Charles. And we have, I think, the first page here. Yeah. So yeah, indeed, this is Metadata for Machine workshop number 8 out of a initially scheduled 8. And so it's, for me, I can't believe it's been 8 weeks already. There's a lot of activity that has gone on in Vodafone Africa, and or a lot of really amazing progress that we've made on a very difficult project, which is to actually launch a network of fair data points. And we're not only doing this, in a remote way, but under the challenges of the COVID pandemic. So, so yeah, it's been an interesting ride for the last 8 weeks, at least for me. And, we shouldn't fail to remind ourselves that in that 8 weeks, we've seen an exponential increase in the number of COVID cases and in COVID deaths, COVID-related deaths. So it's pretty heavy times. But I think we're still doing some really cutting edge work that helps us to be better prepared for either a second wave or for future instances of virus outbreaks. So this is what we're looking at for today's installment. Again, I would like to ask Francesca just to help us with understand the status of the fair data point installation process. This is more technical than it is metadata related, but of course it's like really fundamental to what we want to do. So it's nice to get this update. And of course, we're at Metadata for Machine workshop number 8 today. And then we'll have a little discussion about where we go from, from here. So I have a few slides on that kind of in the middle. And then we will come back again to this idea of the patient data verification, which was really kind of the central stated aim at the beginning of this project. We really wanted to see if we could get electronic case report forms established on fair data points. And I wanted, I'm very happy to have John Graybill here today from CEDAR, who can tell us about a standalone application that can help us to create electronic case report forms. And I'll just remind us again that we also have in the works right now as part of this project, development on software that will be actually embedded in the fair data point. So we would have a future version of the fair data point that would actually have some embedded software helping us to already create these electronic case report forms to do that locally. So with that, let me hand this over then to Francesca, and maybe we can hear the update on the status of the installations.
Thank you, Eric. I would like to welcome everyone to the 8th installment of the Metadata Formation Workshop. It's been an exciting 8 weeks, and I'm just wondering, where did the time go? I would also like to welcome John from CEDA and Dr. Joseph Okello, who will be joining the management team from Kampala International University Teaching Hospital. At the 6th installment of the M4M workshop, we had the troubleshooting for the first time and decided to take stock. And this is what we have here. At that time, we had just one FDP in productions deployment for Uganda, which is the FDP 1.1 in Kampala International University. And then we had one also for Ethiopia. And the ones for Nigeria were in process. That of Zimbabwe, we're still actually even working around the team with Kuda and the rest of the members of the Zimbabwe team. Same for Kenya and Tunisia. But even at this point, at that time, it was quite exciting because this project started with one FDP in mind. And then the next thing we were looking at, okay, having 6 FDPs, one in each country. And then before you know it, we have advanced to the prospect of developing 12 active FDPs. So it's actually exciting with what we have had. I didn't actually tell the country coordinators, but I have gone to look, being in touch with them, and also to look at the home page. And I can tell, if you can go to the next slide, Eric, so that I can give, yes, the status update for the country FDPs. So presently in Uganda, we have the KIU FDP, which is installed and running. Which is installed and running, and you can actually find it online. It's now running on a server and accessible over the internet. And of course, the FDP, the second FDP for Uganda, which is the one at the case clinic, Kampala, it's also been able to call home. Yes, we still have some errors here and there, but we are working towards resolving this to get the best, like the optimal server solution for each of the country FDPs, where we don't compromise one of the basic principles of FAIR, which says that the data must reside in the country of origin. For Ethiopia, of course, the FDP at Mekele University has been in production deployment. We have been working with Getu and the rest of the team to ensure that we're able to get the server in place so that the production deployment process can be error-free and complete. And just today, Addis Ababa University management actually offered to provide server space for the hosting of the FDP for Addis Ababa University. So we're able to get the server requirements and send it over to them. And that is a work in progress. So we expect that the next time we'll meet earlier than that actually, but if we have to give an update the next time, it's easy to say, oh, the FDP at Addis Ababa University now is fully online and is running and accessible. For Nigeria, Nigeria has been ready for like 2 weeks now, and they already have the domain paid for. We're just waiting also for the server space to be made available. And like I said, we're just still looking at the optimal deployment for the server so that we ensure that if we're going for a virtual private server, it's not the one for Nigeria that will be hosted in California or Oregon or Maryland or somewhere else. We really want the one that will be hosted in Nigeria. For Kenya, I've been in touch with Dr. Reginald, and presently the FDP has been deployed locally. So we're now moving on to the next step to make sure that we have the FDP up and running on the server, and then it's accessible outside of the local computer. And for Tunisia as well, Tunisia has been in productions deployment and is in the same state with Nigeria. They're ready and ready. They already have tested the productions deployment without error, but we need to provide the server solution as well for the hosting of the FDP. So Eric, thank you. I'm going to say that we're doing so well. We have overcome the initial problem of not even understanding, okay, or having issues, errors with the different operating systems and the different restrictions or the different problems with the capacities of the system, we have been able to pass that stage, and all the countries involved in the Bodan Africa project, now they have the FDP. For Team Zimbabwe, we had a meeting today with Professor Miriam, and now the team in that country is taking shape, and they are already even doing some of these things. And the good thing about them is most of the members of the team are already involved in the FAIR process, even before the Bodan Africa project kick off. So we're hoping that very soon the FDP for Tunisia to be able to give a definite status update. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Francesca. So maybe a question, Francesca, from what you've just mentioned.
Yes.
Do you think it is a growing interest then, or do you think in terms of staging, it's appropriate to think about data stewards maybe starting to get their hands dirty with actual data, or let's say mock data on the case report forms? Is that something that we're getting close to doing, or
Yes,
it's inappropriate?
Yes, we're actually close, and it's appropriate. All the data stewards are ready. If you look at the project, Kenya and Tunisia, they were the last set of team to enter into the project as a full team. But as you can see, they're actually up to speed as well. I know,
Yeah.
even as at the time Kenya as a country was struggling, one of the data stewards, I think that should be Kamkunji or so, had actually already installed an FDP on her personal PC. So yes, the data stewards are ready.
Okay, super. So I think then the timing to have John Graybiel here today is working out just fine, because
Exactly.
John may give us some really nice options here to at least begin experimenting with the data creation aspect on the project. Wonderful. Okay, so Francesca, is there anything else, or shall I move on?
Yes, please, Eric, you can move on. Just one more point.
Yeah.
Probably sharing, like I'd informed you, we have some documentation made by 3 of the data stewards. We have for FDP installation, in addition to what we already have from Case and Louis, the videos, we also have the documents in text format of the step-by-step installation for FDPs. We have for macOS, we have for Windows, and for Ubuntu, which are the 3 major operating system platforms that the different country teams have been using. So we have those available, and they were actually developed by the data stewards. So that will also tell you, like.
Okay, super. And that's, I think, all available at on the Vodan Africa website.
Yes.
And super. So this is really, I also then, you know, our first steps towards a kind of another deliverable on this project, which is the documentation and the training materials. So, okay, that's great.
Eric?
Yeah.
Maybe at this point, I can also, this is Miriam, by the way.
Yeah,
yeah, I can also maybe announce that we had some very good results in terms of the proposals that we have put forward for the longer term collaboration on creating the Vodan Africa network. So
yeah, this is a great point for it, because I'll make the bridge in the next slide to kind of where we've come from and where we want to go. So yeah, this is a great moment for it. Yeah.
Okay, good. Then I chose well. So I wanted to congratulate everybody here, and particularly you, Eric, and of course Professor Francesca, for bringing us so far. And so we really think that we'll be able to make this sustainable for a longer period of time, which will be good for all of us. So congratulations to us, I wanted to say, Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of really nice momentum, I think, is moving now. And yeah, I think we're also at this critical point where we've really gotten our feet wet. And I think everybody now, you know, at least in a virtual way, knows each other, and there's collaborations that are started up that really make this, I think, a coherent project. So I think we're at this critical point where we're kind of, finishing a kind of a first phase, if only that was kind of defined arbitrarily, but then it gives us an opportunity to start thinking, kind of reassessing where we are in trying to move forward. Just one quick thing before we move on, though, is I think most of you are familiar now with the videos that were made by Luis and Case. And I think there's already some positive feedback here. I was talking with Reginald earlier today, and if I'm not mistaken, I think he was able to use these videos to actually get the FAIR data point running locally on his Windows machine, which is, I think, a pretty impressive effort from what I understand. That was not an easy process. So it could be that these instructional videos are pretty handy in the way they're designed. And by the way, I think they were really designed or scripted following our initial interactions in Vote on Africa. But yeah, all these accumulating resources are on the Vote on Africa site. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, we started this series 8 weeks ago, and Ivy has done a wonderful job creating beautiful posters along the way. Having them all assembled here is giving me a chance just to take a look, appreciate the artwork even a little bit more. So indeed, we've been doing this for 8 weeks. This was a slide that I showed on the first Metadata for Machine workshop. And it was suggested at that time that we try for a series of 8 workshops, and these are the dates that we did this, with the intention of doing, sort of multitasking our way through a bunch of things, and trying to get some certainty where we still had a lot of question marks. And so I'm pretty happy that I think we've achieved that. We've recalculated sort of the format of the Metadata for Machine workshop itself. I would say what we're doing right now is very much not what is envisioned as a typical Metadata for Machine workshop. Well, number one, it's remote. These were initially thought to be face-to-face, but then I don't know when we get to go back to that kind of format anyways. And then also, in some incarnation, these workshops could be one-day hackathon type events where people are encouraged to do very practical metadata building exercises. Given the circumstance here, what we've chosen to do is line up these 8 weeks. And this gives us enough time to kind of assess the technical level of where we are, and also the data preparation and staging with the data stewards in the local environments. And so I think that's worked. This number 8 is completely arbitrary. It was just an estimation on my part, what might be involved in just helping everyone to get familiar and synchronized with the big picture of the project. So we're at number 8 today. It doesn't mean we have to stop here. We can certainly continue with these weekly webinars as long as they remain useful and people are getting some value out of it. And I think one thing that can help us achieve that is a little bit sort of after assessing where we are, kind of looking at the structure of where we want to go. So that takes me to this slide. This is a kind of iconic representation of what we've been doing or what we'd like to achieve. I think this is a good picture that gives us the basic components that we're working with here. But let me try to formulate where we want to go next with these steps here. And this was something that was formulated with Francesca and Miriam in terms of trying to stage our progress here. So in steps 1 and 2, we have worked over the last 8 weeks to get these FAIR data points installed. It looks like we've had to learn a little bit more about some server environment basics and some basics on configuring identifiers, but it looks like that's getting worked out. We also had a discussion, and I'm looking at point 2 now, about, you know, what do these FAIR data points look like in terms of who owns them and how do we refer to them. And these are issues in and of themselves that are really basic and fundamental to the idea of metadata. And what we've come to decide on then is that these FAIR data points are called Vodafone FAIR data points, but they are owned and operated under the local jurisdictions of institutions, and could be hospitals, or could be, for example, universities that are acting on behalf of hospitals. So these are 2 things that are either in progress or that we've achieved. The next stage, and this is very much relevant again to what we will talk to John about today, is this idea of, okay, if we have the FAIR data points and they're configured appropriately, we then want to somehow load them with data or link data to them with the appropriate metadata. And this can be not only different virus outbreak data types, which may consist, you know, sort of broadly construed. So it could be data types that are very clinical, that are very research oriented, that might be virus mutation and sequence data, but then all the way to patient data captured in case report forms. So we should not think, even though we're kind of focusing mostly on these case report forms over the last 8 weeks, we shouldn't limit our scope to that. And in fact, even in the Dutch context, where, for example, the Leiden University Medical Center is setting up their FAIR data point, that they are already as well conceiving of different types of data catalogs that they want to be represented in their FAIR data point. So we will come back to this a little bit later today when we talk to John. But let's say we begin to achieve the goals of linking data to the FAIR data point. The next step on the roadmap then is thinking about how do we query a network of FAIR data points to get some useful information out of them. And yeah, I'll just jump real quick to the slide I have here. This is coming back to this idea of a distributed learning network, or other people refer to it as like a FAIR data train. And the idea is that we might have a network of FAIR data points running, say exposing case report forms, and queries could be sent out, for example, in this case from Tunisia. And these queries would be able to systematically move along this network of FAIR data points, querying for the information that they contain, and bringing back home then a kind of an accumulated set of answers to those questions. So very simple example, we might just want to count the number of active COVID cases that have been reported. And so we could have a query that simply goes to the FAIR data point, and without even having to interfere or to touch or to contact the actual patient data, just by virtue of the FAIR data point announcing the existence of a FAIR data or of a case report form, the algorithm could begin to count COVID-related diagnostic or diagnosed cases. So the train could circulate through the network and return with an accurate view of the reported cases in each case for these FAIR data points. The train could be dispatched at regular time intervals, and you could even begin to get more accurate reported listings of cases over time. And of course, if other hospitals see the value of this, they may then also be contributing their case reports to this network. And then, of course, if we can expand to other data sets, even better. Then more complicated and interesting queries can be set up, looking for correlations between what we see reported on the FAIR data point and all the data assets there. So that was just point number 4. And I think from the point of view of this project, this sending out a federated query on these FAIR data points would be considered kind of the proof of concept that this is all working. And this will be, I think, quite a milestone. This has not yet been achieved at any level, at anything close to this level. So to the degree that we can get federated queries on the Vote on Africa FAIR data points, that I think will be a big deal. And then lastly, these are just other things that are going to need to happen. But again, I think luckily we are already on our road to this. But how do you set up a FAIR data point? What is a Vote on FAIR data point? What are the resources you need to do it? What happens when you run into blocks? Who do you need to contact to initiate the setting up of a FAIR data point? All this will be captured in some kind of documentation and training materials with the people working in this project, so that eventually, and this is now thinking in more like a 6-month time window, we could even be scaling this Vote on FAIR data point in a box. This Vote on FAIR data point in a box, so that it'll be easier and easier for others to replicate the process and set up a FAIR data point if they so desire. So that's where we would like to go. I think in the next 4 weeks, we are really aiming to achieve up to step number 4. So it would be great in the next couple weeks if we can create, even if it's only mock patient case report forms, but to have them, say, registered on the working FAIR data points, say the one at Kampala International University, and then we can begin to run federated queries. That would be, I think, something that's achievable, certainly before the end of July. And if we think about still looking forward as well, I want to make an announcement here, and I'm only able to do this even after we started the webinar today, because I just got the okay from the organizers. The DEIC is the Danish e-infrastructure organization. So it's kind of like a national computing center in a way for Denmark. They handle lots of data related issues, but they have now commissioned 2 metadata for machine workshops. And in keeping with the numbering system here, we're in metadata for machine workshop number 4. I'll call these metadata for machine workshops number 5 and 6. And the first one, number 5, is for, this is for a community that keeps meteorological data, weather data, captured from wind turbines. And they would like to make their data FAIR and available on FAIR data points. And then there's another organization, ANAI, which is a European research infrastructure, which has all kinds of very interesting and complicated environmental data. But they would like both to make their data FAIR. They will do this jointly in a joint style. And the idea would be that they would like to show interoperability between the data outputs. And I'm announcing this partly to say that there's a growing interest in the metadata for machine workshop format, not only for Vote on and for coronavirus, but for other disciplines. And that everyone on this call is invited to join these metadata for machine workshops if you would like. You can do this in a kind of observer status, but you would be welcome to tune in on Zoom calls. We have 4 scheduled for these workshops. The first one will be June 26th, and this is just high-level introduction. July 3, there will be some attempt to get more technical and concrete. There will be homework assigned, and then later in July and later in August, we will schedule another set of events. These are likely to be 2-day events for numbers 3 and 4. But everyone on the call here, I've been told, is welcome to join the DEIC in this. And you know, by then it might also be very interesting to see, you know, if there would even be a possibility of linking data sets between, say, Denmark and Africa and the Netherlands. Okay, so now, Leslie, I just want to kind of remind us where we were last week and introduce John Graybiel. So we had mentioned last week, we're working with these WHO case report forms. They can be made into a machine actionable representation, which allows for us then to capture these instances of patient data in a machine actionable way. And we envision doing that by having a data steward embedded within the local clinic or hospital. They interdict this data, this patient data, as they can, and create these forms, which are stored somewhere, but are linked by metadata to a fair data point. Yeah, so there's the case report forms. If we look a little bit more closely, we have the data steward embedded in the local hospital doing this work. And the question was, well, unless the data steward is very good at coding RDF, it's very difficult to, even if you have the data, to get it into this format. And we mentioned last week that there is this platform called CEDAR, and there are already existing these case report forms where the data can be entered in much more familiar sort of web interface format, so that the data steward does not have to be technical with RDF and the programming language or the knowledge representation language, but can just enter the information in the form itself. And I mentioned that CEDAR had a capability of doing this, and John was able to provide links to some high-level videos for CEDAR that can show you how this works for making data, for publishing data. This is much more CEDAR, or sorry, COVID-related components that allow you to use CEDAR to make the case report forms. And then there's links to the CEDAR application itself and the website. So at that point, John, I would like to invite you to come in if you would like, and maybe give us an introduction to CEDAR so that we can better understand how this might relate to the data stewards who are actually going to have to do the work in the hospitals.
Just before that, Eric,
Yeah.
we'd like to recognize Marek as well, who's here from DSW,
Okay.
from the Czech Republic. I don't know whether I'd like to say hi to the group. If you do remember, DSW was the other metadata solution that was highlighted in concert with CEDAR from Stanford.
Yes, and if Marek, definitely welcome. Nice to have you here. And maybe after John's presentation, if you like, we can go through the intended application that we have in development right now.
Yes.
With your group. Yeah. Okay, super. John?
Yes. Can you hear me all right? I assume so.
Yes.
Help me decide, Eric, what the best format is. I can give it my best shot to just talk about things, or if you think the videos would play, we could play the videos, since they sort of covered what I was thinking would get us near where we want to go. But if not, I can do my best with my feeble brain.
Yeah, at 5 o'clock in the morning.
At 5 o'clock in the morning, yes, exactly. I can't believe you guys are up at this hour every day. It's just, it just boggles my mind.
Absolutely. For 8 weeks. So John,
Yes.
I think what would be really helpful for us is if you could give us a feeling, either through the graphics and the video, or maybe other graphics you have, of what would a data steward located in the hospital actually be, what would they see, and how would they access that, and what would the process look like of actually getting the data into that machine actionable format?
Let's try playing the videos, because I thought for 15 hours about what should go in the videos, and it will say it better than I can, I hope. I'll just start with a little bit of introductory information. Eric has given you enough background for you to have a sense of what CEDAR is, basically being a form system that can do this metadata collection and then distribution. And so I want everybody to know that they can get an account and log in on CEDAR and play with it anytime. It's at cedar.metadata. It's where that says cedar.metadatacenter.org. And it is meant for people to go and play with it a little and see what it's like. We developed this example of a COVID template. The last link of that middle group of 4 is links to that template. And you can go there, you can look at that template, you can try filling it out if you want. You can, there's lots of different ways to access the information. So do feel free to play. There's a lot of documentation. I pointed to the / references there at the end of the slide that Eric has. And very detailed help documentation with screenshots and everything. So if you're interested, do feel free to play with it. I'm going to try to play this because it will be a lot crisper than I will be. So let's just see what happens. I am sharing screen. I believe it will be that one. And feel free to interrupt, Eric, if this does not seem to be going well.
John, do you need me to give up my screen sharing? Is that the idea?
Apparently not. It didn't complain when I started sharing. I'll need you to tell me if the noise comes across to you guys. I'm not entirely sure it will.
It's maybe a question, because at least, well, let me, I will stop sharing.
Okay, yeah, awesome.
Okay, yeah.
Well, I was sharing and now I'm not sure that I'm sharing anymore.
I see it, I see it.
Oh, you can see it? Okay.
Yeah, I see a 5-minute video, yeah.
Yep.
Let me press play. Now, can you hear that okay?
I don't hear it, no.
Okay, so I will try and tell you.
Yeah.
So what we're showing here, hang on a second. What we're showing here is the 3 steps that you can perform with CEDAR to make metadata. And the first step that you have to perform is to decide on the metadata that you want to collect and make some kind of a form for that. This is pretty classic to have to make a form to collect information.
Yeah, and that's very much the metadata for machine idea as well. That's where we would create those forms.
Exactly. So CEDAR often has a form you can reuse, and as I mentioned, we've created one for the COVID case that we had. Second level is the completion of the metadata, and here this is just a matter of filling out a form, and we call the forms when they're filled out metadata instances, and I mention that just as you see other documentation, you may come across it. And then at the third level, there's the trick of I've got all those forms that got completed in CEDAR. How do I get them back out? There's actually a couple of different ways you can do that, and a little bit later we'll show that. But it can be done either by the scientists actively publishing it or software being set up to pull the information out of CEDAR. And what we'll show next, you'll probably recognize this is a revised version, I think, of the form that Eric might have been showing. And this is what we created. This is what you see in CEDAR when you look at the work we did to create this form. We see these different elements of the form. And this is just a very quick, here, look, it's a form. You can see it has fields in it. No time to talk about it further. But if you wanted somebody to fill it out, you could give them a link. And that link basically says, fill out this form. They click on it. They would say, oh, I have to log in. If I don't have an account, I can get one right away. This is what you would do if you go to metadatacenter.org. So once you do have an account, you can log in and you go back to the form. This is now sitting here waiting for you to actually fill out the information for your first case, your first patient. Click on a form, start filling it out. This, I think, will be comfortable for most people who have done a form for online purchases or anything else. An important thing here is that in this case, for example, this is a controlled vocabulary that has a controlled set of terms and can support autocompletion. It will not let you put in something that isn't in the controlled list of terms, which can be very important.
And which is really essential. Just to interrupt, John, and the controlled vocabulary and the format by which you input the information is really critical for the machine actionability later on, correct?
That's correct. That's a big point of CEDAR, is to make everything as precise as possible and as accurate as possible. And controlled vocabularies are one way that we do that. Yeah. And there are a lot of them available that can be reused, and we reuse some of those for this form. So one of the things that you're in the middle of seeing here when I start is that some of these are repeated elements where you might have to report multiple cases or multiple contacts. And so CEDAR can support that and can have large numbers of elements, essentially infinite numbers of elements there. And you can go back and forth between the different ones as you create more. There's folding, a certain amount of organization going on. And then when we save the form, we get a nice notice that, yes, that's been saved. Oh, I had to save it off in your account. A lot of things in this case weren't filled out, and so it notifies you of that. Another big goal of CEDAR is to let people know ahead of time when things are not the way they should be. Now we're looking at what the metadata actually looks like. You've seen RDF that Eric has shown previously, and that's one of the two forms that we present our metadata in. So now we can pop back out of this, filling out this form, having saved it. And the metadata instance got created in my own space there. And there are a lot of different things we can do with it once we have it inside of CEDAR. We can share it with people in our group, with other individuals, make copies, move it. And finally, there's this open view feature that we'll show in just a few minutes. And that's not useful to us. Hang on one second. I'll go to the next one. So that was the making of metadata with CEDAR at a very high and quick level. And then the second stage is the publishing question. So what do we do to get that metadata out of CEDAR? You've seen this diagram before. The bottom part is the key part that talks about getting data out of CEDAR. And I'll talk about 3 different ways that you can do that today, 4 actually. And we'll show one of them that has the most relevance to you all perhaps. So this first one is the most relevant one perhaps, and that is CEDAR can actually publish these forms to the web if someone wanted to do that. And that isn't what you'd want to do with patient data, of course, but it gives us a starting point for our development. I'll come back and talk about that a little bit more. You could also write an API that pulls the metadata from CEDAR and reprocesses it into whatever form you want. And so that can be done at each site or whatever to pull metadata out. And then a third technique is somewhat odd, that is to actually copy the metadata form manually. You saw me show you the metadata by clicking on one of the links and it popped up all of the JSON from the file. And that's a way you could capture it in your local environment. Finally, CEDAR can do submissions to certain external systems. It can be developed to actually submit directly to an external system. But what we'll show is this open view editor-like capability that doesn't quite do editing. So this is a filled out form. You have the link to this and can look at it if I remember to share it properly. And what we can do is say, please enable open view on this. And when we do that, we get the notification that happened, that worked. And when we look again, just to convince ourselves, look at the drop-down menu, we'll see that the options have changed. You can either disable it to set it back the way it was, or you can actually visit the open view page. And again, this open view page is just a web page that anyone can visit. And so you all can visit it with the link that you have from the presentation. And so you can see a lot of the same information. The other key point here is that you have a URL that you can give to anybody else to look at this if you want. And so the title is at the top. You click on it, you see all the metadata associated with this form. And I'm just going to pause this briefly here because the thing that makes this particularly interesting from Bodan's perspective is that in everything you're seeing now, it's all being generated by the CEDAR that's living at Stanford University. What we are building, in the process of building, is something that will look very much like this, but it will be an embedded editor. And the embedded editor you can deploy in your own system. It will generate the metadata in your own system. Out of that, you get the metadata file directly. It never goes off to some CEDAR system far away in some other country. It can just be wherever you have deployed the form is where the metadata will be generated and where your software or people can pull the metadata. So that's the long-term plan, if you like. And we also have the plan that CEDAR will be eventually deployable to so that the entire CEDAR software, much like the Fair Data Point, can be deployed in other environments. We're technologically, we could do that within the next month. The difficulty is that there are a lot of policy decisions that would have to be made about the maintainability of a system like that. So if people are motivated to explore that further, either of these solutions further, I'd be happy to talk about them at a future time. So the rest of this is a quick hop through the page, and you see some of the nesting and the indentation of the form, the 4 elements that make it up. There's a lot of small icons here that represent the ability to get more information. And if I'm lucky, I'll stop at just the right moment in a second and point out a detail of that. You can also see the advanced JSON LD access, RDF access at the bottom. So one moment. Right. So here we're seeing what the description of that particular element is, and a little bit further on, we see a information about where a particular thing comes from. So we talked about this being a controlled vocabulary. Here you can mouse over the I symbol there and see that this vocabulary is in fact a branch of the NCI taxonomy vocabulary that the National Cancer Institute maintains. So it's a very thorough set of information about what the source of these terms are and how they're getting filled out. And as I mentioned, we have the same kinds of access of the metadata itself, but also uniquely here in this view, we have the ability to look at the schema that was used to generate this capability. So that's pretty much the end of that set of videos. And I will just close by observing that Eric and I have been, and our team have been working for 2 or 3 years at least, I don't know exactly how long, on bringing all of these things together in a way that's useful. And it really wasn't until very, very recently that it's become clear that all of this is coming to fruition. We're really motivated to try to accelerate our development in areas that would be useful to you all if that's something that is of immediate value. With the COVID activities, the coronavirus activities, we have to be willing to reprioritize and make some adjustments to try and support what people need. So I just wanted to encourage all of you on the call and working with Eric to consider what your opportunities are, what your needs are, and if it's something that is a driver for what we're trying to do, then please have those conversations so we can see if we can possibly provide these services to you even faster. Thank you for the time.
Super, thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Bet.
So I'm looking at the time, and I'm going to ask Charles as a point of order. Do you think we can go a little bit over time today?
Yeah, it's fine. I think if we can do 10 minutes over max, I think the participants will bear with us because it's a unique situation, I guess.
Yeah, okay, super. Thanks, Charles. So, John, that's, I think, a great introduction to the platform, to CEDAR and its capabilities. And I have to say that even though I think CEDAR is what, now up to like 10 years in the making, if I'm not mistaken, that it really perfectly envisioned this idea of a metadata for machine workshop at a very early stage, maybe not by name. And certainly GoFair is providing, you know, a way of trying to package this more. Like you say, things are kind of coming together. Yeah, so it's really a great introduction, I think, to really essential capability for making fair data that was sort of anticipated and built 10 years ago, yeah?
Yes, yes, it is. We've been thinking about these metadata challenges and issues that everyone faces for a long time. And just as everybody is hitting the combination of, oh, look at all this data we have to actually think about and describe and do a better job of managing, and something motivational like the coronavirus comes along, it's really been a change of view for sure.
Indeed, and making all that metadata available specifically for machine processing, I guess.
Just so.
Okay, so you know, it would be great to launch into some questions and answers, but given the time frame, and I apologize for maybe going over today, but I would like to also hear for the moment from Marek, who's joining us, because we will hear about an application. And let me see, I will try to share my screen as well. I'll go back to sharing this screen. And so Marek, maybe we could just, you could walk us through this diagram, if it's in fact, if I went ahead and drew it correctly, and we can just, maybe if you could comment on it a little bit. But this is another alternative in capturing the patient data in the case report form. And in this case, you know, I'm showing the Vodafone Africa data steward interfacing with a web form that in some ways may be comparable to what we saw in the CEDAR example, but is in this case fully embedded in the fair data point application itself. So that capturing the data here can turn into an entirely localized process within the organization. And what I'm trying to show here is that the data steward is entering data into the web form via the fair data point. That data launches electronic case report forms. They go where they need to go, but then there's metadata that on the fair data point that connect to them. Is this an accurate view, Marek?
Yeah, hello everyone. Exactly. Thanks, Eric, for the introduction and explaining. It's like that, and I think the most important thing about this setup is that it will be packaged as just one package, as you already tried to deploy fair data points. So it will be deployed together with the fair data points. So it will just provide the interface for entering the data to the form. Yeah. And it will just easily make the submission of the form, and you won't have to like take care about metadata and data, but it will like do it for you itself. So yeah. Like just make it easier for users.
Super, and I should mention, you're joining us today from the Czech Republic, where you're based, yes?
Yeah, thanks. Exactly.
Marek?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So you're joining us from the Czech Republic today.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm showing here an icon for the data stewardship wizard, but maybe it's important to say too that the work being done is coming from a spin-off associated with the original data stewardship wizard technology, I think.
Yeah, because initially the data stewardship wizard is of course focused on data stewardship, but it's extensible and flexible, so it can handle like any type of forms. So for data, so you can even do something like this.
And so, you know, what I think is very nice then about having John and Marek here today to show these applications is that I hope it gives the data stewards now and everyone participating in Vote on Africa a much more concrete vision and a better feeling about what it might look like to actually be a data steward in the hospital environment and capturing this patient data. And to the degree that we can get examples of these case report forms, either mock data or real data, I think it will also help to crystallize the technical aspects of the project in terms of getting the FAIR data points up and in getting them visible to the world, with at the same time having all the proper data access conditions specified, and in a proper stewarding of the actual data itself, whether it's at the hospital or a university. And so I know that the application is in development. I think we might not expect it until like maybe the end of July or so. But when that happens, we can certainly install I guess, a new version of the FAIR data point, and then people would be able to have access to the form. Is that right, Marek?
I think that the FAIR data points can like stay and just upgrade, because it's easy to upgrade a FAIR data point. With metadata will stay there and they will migrate to the new version. So it won't be necessary to deploy again.
Okay, super. And then, so maybe then in the meantime, if there's interest, we could begin practicing with case report forms using, for example, the CEDAR platform. One thing to be clear as well, we're working now in the Netherlands, in Leiden here, with the idea of defining and being, you know, to be able to define and to publish a technical specification of the electronic case report form, and or, you know, let's say the machine readable version of the case report form, and then in that way, different providers such as CEDAR or Marek's group would be able to make sure that their applications are outputting appropriately defined data models and RDF that are conformant to that specification. So in that way, we can certainly open up the possibility of multiple ways of capturing this information. And we already see that in some cases, it's already possible to use one tool. In another case, we can use a different tool that can satisfy the constraints in these different areas. So it's nice to always have the capability of having multiple options here. But what GoFair would like to concern itself with is the creation of that specification to which lots of different tools can build towards. And then that way you could be guaranteed, for example, in Vote on Africa, that whatever tool you use, it will be conformant to this Vote on standard. That's sort of the approach. And so I'm very thankful for John and Marek to be here today and to give us this overview and introduction. I'm hoping it's really helpful for everybody. And I think what it will also do is start to engender a discussion in the group about, these next steps proceeding forward in what we might call metadata for machine workshop number 9 and 10 and subsequent ones to come. So I will end it there, Charles. If there's any time for questions, that's fine, but I would leave that to you.
Yes, we can take 1 or 2 questions. Bert has a question as he's typing it down. I see Esther has already put one in the chat box, highlighting what do you mean specifically by technical specifications? Will you be writing a technical report for this? Is the ISO going to be involved in it?
Yeah, so the nice thing about the way GoFair operates, and certainly the way Vodafone Africa can choose to operate, it's entirely under the discretion of Vodafone Africa, and that is at what level are these specifications created, and under which auspices. So it's really under the discretion of this project. That's all we have to do is say, well, for Vodafone Africa, this is how we do it. Here's the specification. We can define that in different ways, technically, using RDF, but it makes it very unambiguous and very clear what that specification is. And tool providers can build then towards that spec. Whether or not it should receive some kind of certification from other organizations such as ISO is really a secondary question. And I think that just depends on the evolution of this network of fair data points and the project and in how people see it and where it goes. So I would say it's great to start very lightweight. It says, this is a specification that this group has defined among themselves. And then we're very happy to implement it. And if it should evolve later, then we can put in a process for that as well.
All right. I have a question actually directed to John. So if you take like the context for how most of these FDPs might operate, where you have FDPs being installed in hospitals and given the standings of most ministries on privacy of this data. So when you're setting up your own form on the CEDA platform, where exactly does the data go and how is it being stored so we can cover that data protection issue?
Are you asking a question about at this moment, or how would we do it if we were supporting
at this moment? Because you did say eventually you're going to deploy one that can operate locally. So the data is not going anywhere else. It would just be locally where the FDP is being deployed. So currently now, if there is a hospital that wants to use your platform more or less to generate the forms going forward, are there like specific data protection measures that you have to ensure that data is kept private given its nature?
Yes, we have, I would say we don't have above and beyond security for these systems. We have, they are created with private accounts, and people's metadata and forms and whatever they create is private unless they explicitly share it. Yep. And so in that sense, there should not be anyone able to see any of the information that is even going back and forth. All of the systems are running SSL protocols and appropriate security authentication systems of that sort. So at the level of normal system operations, we have in mind that level of security. We have not gone to the level of dealing with some of the US HIPAA regulations, PHI type regulations for personal health information and so on, because our initial target was not clinical, but was biomedical. So we are evolving our presence in that regard. And our expectation, what I would do, we have a meeting on Thursday, our standard weekly meeting, which I've already told our technical person I'm taking over so we could brainstorm these questions. Our next step is basically to say, what are the different options that we have to bring something online faster that would be even more secure / less transmitting of data than what we have now. So what I would need in order to make that conversation really effective is the right people to talk to about what the needs are. I have a broad sense, I'm hearing it all secondhand through Eric, sometimes third hand through Eric, but in terms of technical detail, it would be really wonderful to have a conversation with 1 or 2 customers who are motivated to explain the local universe to us so that we can fully understand it.
So, yeah, this is Miriam. So John and Marek, that was just really amazing. And Eric, thank you. I think this has really helped us to understand better where different things are. And Francesca and I will be in touch with you both together, of course, with everybody else, Eric, Bert, and so on, and then discuss it back here with everyone so that we start seeing a little bit the journey forward. But what is clear is that a lot of work has been done from your end, and that there should be a lot of space for collaboration to bring this up to level as soon as possible, all of course within the kind of the basic principles of this this endeavor, which is that we keep the data safe and local in residence. So we'll definitely be in touch, and again, thanks very much appreciated.
All right, I think for closing, all right. I think for a closing question, Bart did have one.
Yes, I had one question, and I think it's wonderful to have John and Marek on this call. It's great to see that we have these tools, very good to share that with us. My question is more about the integration with existing patient data. So is there anything in the tools that you have at this moment that could also help a hospital, for instance, somewhere in Ethiopia or in Uganda, who already has some recorded patient data, but in an entirely different format? And then the question is, how do they map, or are there any tools that could help them to map easily to the standard form that we have defined either in the wizard or by CEDAR?
I can just offer a quick comment, which is that that's a very large question, and it just has a lot of pieces to the answer, so we can't go into them now, of course. There are a lot of solutions for particular situations, and it is necessary, I think, to talk about cases in more detail to figure out the best paths. We've had some people convert data in order to put it into the CEDAR format, and we can definitely provide guidance on how to do that. But that's one size fits all, I think, and we would really need to talk more to individual situations in order to be helpful, I'm thinking.
I would guess so. Marek, from your side, also some guidance or some comments on this?
Yeah, I agree with John. It depends on the formats and also on the quantity. If it like works to bring up some solution specific to the format that they have. But for example, we had the machine actionable DMPs hackathon, I think a few weeks ago, and it was very easy to like make prototype of import of like something totally new into the wizard. So it's technically possible, but it always depends on the case.
Yeah, clear, thanks.
All right. I think in the interest of time, we are going to stop there. John and Eric and Marek would like to thank you for taking time to be with us here today and giving us all this cool information on your solutions and how they would be applied. For some announcements before we sign off, as always, the recorded version of the webinar will be available on the Vodafone Africa website next week. So in case you miss part of it or would like to review or go over it once more, be sure to check it out. The links to the video for CEDA have also been shared in the chat box or in the chat, and also will be shared as well with the slides that will be shared on email by Ivy over the coming days. So also be sure to join us next week for what I guess will be the 9th installment of the Metadata for Machines workshop. Details on the timings will be shared as always on the communication channels for Vodafone Africa, being the Slack and the WhatsApp groups. As Francisca is highlighting in the chat box, do follow Vodafone Africa on Twitter to stay up to date on the proceedings as well as any initiatives that are running off from Vodafone Africa. So once again, I'd like to thank you all for joining. I'd like to thank our presenters, and we will see you again next time.
Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.